Discover 12 transformative Stoic mindset shifts for incredible calm and unshakable focus now. The flickering bulb in Sarah's kitchen cast long shadows across the cluttered table, where bills, school papers, and a crumpled letter lay scattered, each bearing the weight of her growing anxiety. Rumbling in her stomach echoed the exhaustion that seeped through her bones after a double shift at the diner. She gripped the paper, each line tugging at her heart. Weird, showing off. The words snarled around her thoughts, dragging her downward into the whirlpool of worry. How could she protect Jake from this abyss of misunderstanding? Tonight, like many others, felt like she was fighting a current, one where she was left grasping for air. In the past, she had not hesitated to confront challenges head-on, but with Jake's well-being at stake, uncertainty flickered. Did he need comfort or a crusader? She made dinner on autopilot, clattering pots, her mind racing. I wish I could just make it stop, she whispered, half to herself, half hoping Jake would hear. Days blended together as she toggled between constant fatigue and the nagging guilt of being unable to afford meaningful support for her son. He was so intelligent, brilliant even, but that brilliance seemed like a scarlet letter, a magnet for teasing, and it seeped into Sarah's bones like a chill. Just as doubts tentacled around her heart, her phone buzzed repeatedly, pulling her thoughts back into the present. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The meeting loomed ominously overhead. Sarah felt her shoulders creeping up toward her ears as she awaited her fate. Her mind raced to the thoughts she had stashed away, thoughts of inadequacies, of fears that she was failing as a mother, of wondering if she would have the strength to stand in front of a room full of cold, indifferent faces. Walking into that school building felt like stepping onto hallowed grounds, yet all she could perceive were broken reflections of what it could be. Breath caught, she envisioned the principal's facade, authoritarian, dismissive. Would he see the plight of her son or dismiss it like a minor inconvenience? Heart in her throat, she twisted her phone nervously, imagining it buzzing with more messages from Jake. How could she let him down now? She didn't just want to be awake, she wanted to be effective. Self-doubt wrapped tightly around her. And then, a buzz. The message from Jake materialized and gripped her with an ironclad grip. Mom, why are you standing up for me? I'm scared. What if they don't listen? Each word clawed at her, revealing the fiery urgency she had buried. She realized this wasn't just another battle, it was a defining moment, a litmus test of her resolve. Everything stood in the balance. In that split second, Sarah felt the swell of defiance rise within her, but alongside it a swirling storm of too many what-ifs. The stakes had never felt higher, and as her fingers clenched the chair's edge tightly, she realized the intensity of her own frailty. What if she failed? What if lifting her voice only led to more heartbreak for Jake? She bit down hard, not allowing herself to falter, although in the quiet of her heart, behind the steely facade, a war waged silently. This was their turning point, and she couldn't turn back now. Sarah stood at the entrance of the school corridor, a metal door that felt as heavy as her uncertainties. Each step forward was a calculated risk, a leap into the unknown where her vulnerability lay exposed before an audience that swirled with judgments and preconceptions. The crumpled letter still pressed against her palm, a tangible reminder of the weight that felt both external and profoundly internal. Her role as protector twisted into the fabric of her fears. What if she choked on her words? What if the principal dismissed her concern, painting her as an overbearing parent rather than a passionate advocate for her son? With every breath, the tightening in her chest crept higher. She chose to breathe deeper, not for herself, but for Jake. It became a mantra: today is not just about me. Circular hallways stretched before her like a maze, each row of lockers echoing the doubt in her mind. She fought to anchor herself in a reality where she was not merely a mother but a force demanding acknowledgement. The walls hummed with memories of her own school days, a time when she had felt unseen and unheard. Those feelings resurfaced, but they tasted different now, seasoned with years of personal struggle. Mom, are you there? Jake's voice echoed in her thoughts, a sweet sound that spurred her feet into motion. This was about reclaiming his narrative. She couldn't let history repeat itself. As she approached the meeting room, flashes of words scattered like confetti in her mind. You're not good enough. Why do you care? She tore through them one by one, reaffirming her worth. The door loomed ahead, and she hesitated, eyes flitting toward the polished glass. Inside, she could already see the principal, a tall man adorned with a frown that seemed chiseled into place. Stand your ground, she whispered to herself, a fleeting courage woven through trepidation. This was no accident, her presence was purposeful. After a knock on the door echoed through the stillness, Sarah entered. The room felt smaller than she anticipated, and her heart raced in earnest as eyes turned toward her. The principal had his pen poised over a clipboard, his expression mirroring skepticism. Miss Scott, please take a seat, he said, not bothering to hide his impatience. This was at her moment wrapped in a chilling shroud of disbelief. Thank you. Her voice was steadier than she felt. As she sat down, a fresh wave of determination rolled over her. She had come this far, and the fear of inadequacy had to take a back seat. I'm here to discuss Jake, she started, feeling every eye latch onto her. I want to ensure he is supported, that his needs are recognized. The conversations he is having with peers, they're hurting him. I need you to understand. He is not weird or showing off, he is just unique. The principal raised an eyebrow, his face impassive. We appreciate your concern, but I assure you, kids will be kids. They sometimes say things without meaning harm. His dismissive attitude sent a jolt of anger through her, igniting something fierce. She had expected pushback, but hearing those words made the fight in her burn brighter. But those words do harm. They shackle him. I know what that feels like, none of us should endure it. We're supposed to empower our kids, not brush aside their pain. With every word that spilled from her, she recognized a strength burgeoning within her. The anger morphed into clarity, illuminating her mission. She was fighting for Jake's right to exist beyond labels, a truth that resonated with her own hidden struggles. She could feel the echo of his fear threaded through her voice, fear of invisibility. The principal shifted in his seat, something momentarily flickering in his eyes. Was it understanding? Perhaps an acknowledgement of her convictions that couldn't be overlooked? Those seconds stretched among them like a battlefield, and Sarah sensed an opening, an opportunity. Let us not just discuss this, Sarah pressed, more fiercely, let us create meaningful change together. Your action leads to his resilience. This is about hope. Her words hung in the air, daring him to respond, to rise to the responsibility he held. Sarah could feel the transformation happening within her. She was no longer just a mother advocating, a warrior for her child, emerging in the hard-earned light of her resolve. What had begun as a path steeped in uncertainty turned into a firm foundation for newfound resilience. And as she spoke, the fear of rejection started to ebb, replaced by the possibility of progress. But as the principal opened his mouth, poised to speak, would he join her crusade or silence her with indifference? The tension solidified, and both possibilities shimmered in the space between them, leaving Sarah at a precipice. The moment had arrived for the final push, and she was ready to embrace whatever might come next. As the principal finally opened his mouth, Sarah's pulse quickened, poised at the tipping point of vulnerability and resolve. The interpretation of his next words would redefine everything. This felt like a defining moment for both Jake and herself. Miss Scott, the principal began, pausing with a flicker of something unspoken in his gaze. I understand your passion for your son, truly, but you must realize the challenges we face as educators. We can't just what? Sarah interrupted, emboldened by a fierce urgency. Dismiss his needs? Overlook the pain of his peers that cuts deeper than you know? As a teacher, you have the power to shape these children, to guide them towards understanding and empathy. We can't afford to let it slide anymore. His brow furrowed slightly, a hint of respect threading through the air. Perhaps it was her directness that caught him off guard, forcing him into unfamiliar territory. The room felt overwhelmingly small as she continued, uncharacteristically animated. You teach resilience, don't you? Why not build it with understanding? Every child deserves an environment where they can thrive, not react to the biases that you deem trivial. I don't want Jake shrinking into himself, I want him to stand proud. But he can't do that alone. As she spoke, Sarah realized something important. She wasn't merely advocating for Jake anymore, she was advocating for herself too. This wasn't just about her child's struggle. It was the very resonance of her own past that fueled her conviction, a side of herself she had long kept quiet. Fighting for her son became intertwined with the desire to reclaim her own voice from the shadows. The principal looked taken aback, shifting in his seat. Her heart raced. Had she struck a chord? What would it take for him to join her side? You're asking for something significant, he finally responded, his tone less dismissive. Establishing programs for sensitivity and inclusion takes time and resources. It's complicated. Then let us keep it simple, Sarah retorted, her confidence solidifying into purpose. You have influence. Start with one assembly, one discussion. Inspire the students to open dialogues, to understand differences, and to advocate for one another. Isn't that part of the mission here? With every idea that spilled forth, Sarah could feel a shift within her, a ripple of growth as she embraced the fullness of her passionate advocacy. It was as though she were peeling back layers of her past insecurities and revealing a self she demasked for too long. The fire that burned in her heart extended into a torch for change. And what if the principal said slowly, weighing his words as he leaned back in contemplation? What if we agreed to try a pilot program? The words hung between them like a balloon filled with possibilities, buoyed by nervous anticipation. Sarah felt herself inhale sharply, the air thick with potential, as she studied his face for sincerity. Let us outline what it could look like together, she proposed, emboldened by the slight flicker of interest she read in his demeanor. This can be the start of something not just for Jake, but for every child who feels out of place. We owe it to them. In that moment, Sarah didn't recognize the woman who spoke with such fervor. She marveled at the growth unfolding. She held her ground, navigating the conversation not only as a concerned mother but as a leader of change. This was a breakthrough, not merely for Jake but one that spoke to her accumulated struggles and desires for significance in a world that had often rendered her voiceless. The principal nodded, mapping out a tentative timeline and initial steps to develop the program. As they delved into details, Sarah's mind buzzed with ideas. Could this really happen? Would she truly be part of shifting the climate at this school? Yet beneath the excitement, a nagging question lingered in her mind. What shadows would she need to confront within herself as she stepped further into this role? Would the battles of her past threaten to overshadow this newfound resolve? As they concluded the initial discussion and she stood to leave, her heart buoyed by the mere breath of change, Sarah knew the journey was just beginning. What remained ahead was the deeper revelation, the enemy she would face within the confines of her own expectations and fears. Could she sustain the momentum she had initiated? The truth of her obligations and uncertainties loomed on the horizon, waiting for her to embrace or escape. Stepping out of the small room, she felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The stakes were mounting, and she was caught in the current of transformation, hers, Jake's, and the school's. Would she be the architect of resilience or falter against the weight of doubt yet again? As the heaviness of the door clicked behind her, Sarah knew she was on the brink of something powerful. Now she had to rise to the challenge. But what would the next confrontation reveal about her true self? Sarah stepped into the brightness of the school hallway, the faint chatter of students a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere she had just left. Her heart raced as she traced the tiled floor, now imbued with purpose but tinged with uncertainty. The principal's cautious agreement felt monumental, yet how would she manifest this promise into reality? How could she translate her fervor for change into a tangible program? Questions swirled in her mind, and she found herself drawn towards a wall lined with photographs of past school events, smiling faces frozen in time, each snapshot a celebration of unity and achievement. She wondered if those smiles masked the silent struggles of children like Jake. Could a campaign of empathy really alter the fabric of this school? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Jake's teacher, requesting a follow-up meeting. Another opportunity for dialogue, but it struck her with a pang of anxiety. What if she faltered in the next conversation? What if her previous momentum dissolved into self-doubt? As she ambled towards her car, a revelation pierced through the fog of her apprehension. This wasn't just about advocating for her son, it represented her own reclamation. If the past had silenced her, now was the moment to craft a new narrative. That evening, as she sank into her living room sofa, she pored over resources on educational reforms focused on sensitivity and inclusion. Each page she turned sparked ideas, molding her understanding of structural change. The hours slipped away, and with them, so did the comfort of her old self. She envisioned community resources, parent workshops, and student-led initiatives breathing life into her thoughts. The potential was dizzying, and yet, creeping uncertainty nagged at her. What if parents opposed her ideas? What if the students resisted the change? It dawned on her then she needed to fortify herself against criticism, both external and internal. It would take resilience to advocate effectively. The following day, with determination coursing through her veins, Sarah prepared for her meeting with Jake's teacher. She meticulously crafted her talking points, focusing on clarity and vision. The blueprint for her advocacy didn't just reside in her head, it was gaining shape, ready to be tested. As she sat across from Jake's teacher, she noticed the warmth in the woman's demeanor. The kindness softened her nerves, but not her determination. I want to create an environment where every child feels validated and understood. We need inclusivity at every level, she stated, her voice steady. The teacher nodded thoughtfully, her brow slightly furrowed. It's ambitious, Sarah. But it's noble. Their discussion flowed, and to Sarah's surprise, ideas for integration surfaced organically. They spoke about parent-teacher alliances and collaborative discussions that could stem from Jake's situation, creating space for broader conversations about challenges faced by marginalized students. As they finalized the outline for their next steps, Sarah felt a growing confidence. This was not merely a fight for Jake, this was her fight for a community that needed her voice. It struck her that the real challenge wasn't just articulating her vision, but staying authentic in the face of potential backlash. However, there was that lingering fear: what if her past failures re-emerged to derail her forward momentum? She glanced at her reflection in the window, momentarily seeing the hesitation buried beneath layers of resolve. Was she truly ready to shoulder this responsibility? As she left the school that day, adrenaline mingled with trepidation. Her vision was materializing, gaining shape within her grasp, but she remained at the precipice of her own self-discovery. If she was to lead this charge, she had to confront the shadows of her self-doubt. She realized that confronting her insecurities would be as crucial as changing the school culture. With every step away from the building, she stepped toward understanding her latent strength and navigating the terrain of her hidden fears. The journey had just begun, and each decision she made carried weight. She was resolved to nurture this spark of purpose, but the moment of truth loomed ahead. Could she truly rise above her past? As she reflected on the path before her, she couldn't shake the feeling: what would it take for her to embrace the challenges that lay ahead? Sarah woke early the next morning, the lingering shadows of her uncertainty clinging to her like a damp cloak. The sunrise cast a golden hue across her bedroom wall, and she paused, reminding herself that this was a new beginning. Each dawn was a chance to shed the remnants of doubt, yet the weight of what lay ahead loomed large. Today, she would present her vision not just to Jake's teacher but also to a gathering of other parents. She had invited them to discuss the proposal she had painstakingly crafted over the past few nights. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that sharing this initiative was an extension of her own journey, an opportunity to connect, engage, and appeal for understanding. As she prepared breakfast, her mind danced between thoughts of logistics and the potential reception of her ideas. The kitchen filled with the scent of coffee, a small comfort in the storm of her emotions. It was a marathon of internal dialogue. What if the parents were dismissive? What if they questioned her motives? Shaking her head, Sarah steeled herself. Advocacy meant vulnerability. It required the courage to invite critique, to face opposition with grace rather than retreating into the shadows. The gathering took place in the school library, a space she had always associated with quiet reflection. Ironically, today, it felt like a stage where her fears could either be validated or dismantled. She arrived early, setting up the chairs in a semicircle, ensuring that everyone felt comfortable and included. Her heart raced as she glanced at the door, waiting for the first faces to appear. When the parents began trickling in, each greeting felt like a small victory. They offered smiles and casual mentions of the morning rush, but beneath the surface, Sarah sensed the skepticism lingering in the air. Taking her seat, she allowed herself a moment to observe, to gauge reactions, despite the apprehension pulling at her insides. As she initiated the discussion, her voice carried power, reflecting a newfound resolve. "Thank you all for being here. I want us to talk about making our school an inclusive environment, one where every child feels accepted and valued." Responses varied. Some parents nodded, intrigued, others crossed their arms, a defensive stance. Questions emerged, as they always do: how will this work? What changes are necessary? And with each inquiry, Sarah could feel the tension in her stomach tighten. Instead of responding with anxiety, she tapped into her preparations. "I understand these changes will require effort and commitment, but I believe that creating open dialogues can alleviate fears and foster understanding." A parent in the back interjected, "But what if the children resist? They never had to accommodate those who are different." The comment stung, a piercing reminder of her own uncertainties. "Resilience doesn't flourish in a bubble, it thrives in real experiences," Sarah countered, surprising herself with her own conviction. "It's our job as parents and educators to model empathy so that our children can learn. If we come together and share our stories, we can spark change." She noticed a shift in the room. Instead of retreating, she leaned into vulnerability, sharing Jake's experiences. As she recounted moments of isolation and misunderstanding, she felt the emotional weight lift, replaced by a shared connection. Gradually, other parents began to share their stories. Struggles and triumphs echoed back to her like a chorus of recognition. There was something transformative about that honesty. It made the daunting task ahead seem achievable, as they organically began to collaborate on potential solutions. As the meeting began to wind down, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of relief. They hadn't just laid the foundation for her vision, they opened a channel for ongoing dialogue. Yet, residual concerns simmered within her. What if this momentary unity didn't last? What if she couldn't maintain this momentum? In the days that followed, Sarah remained vigilant, crafting emails to keep the conversation alive, and scheduling follow-ups to solidify their efforts. Still, she couldn't silence the nagging question: would this be enough? On the night before her next parent meeting, she reviewed her notes, but as she settled into bed, she was haunted by doubts that crept through the cracks of her progress. Tomorrow, she would face not only the parents but also the agonizing possibility of failure. The specter of her past loomed large, but she realized she was now standing on a precipice, one leap of faith away from confronting her deepest fears. The moment of truth was upon her. Would she take the leap? Would she dare to push through despite everything that whispered otherwise? The only answer remained just outside her reach, fueling a sense of urgency in her chest. Tomorrow could either mark a new beginning or echo her past failures. The choice felt staggering. The morning of the meeting arrived with an unsettling calm that belied the storm within Sarah. She dressed deliberately, choosing a crisp blue blouse that echoed her resolve. Staring in the mirror, she whispered affirmations, each word aimed at reining in her racing thoughts. "I am capable. I am worthy. I will lead." But behind the veneer of confidence, her heart was a cage of fluttering doubts. As she stepped into the school building, the familiar scent of chalk and paper struck her with nostalgia, igniting memories of her own schooling. She had come a long way since then, yet here she was, grappling with insecurities as other parents mingled in small groups, laughter mingling with serious conversations about school issues that felt woefully fragmented. Once again, she positioned herself in the library, transforming it into a space of intention. This time, it was not merely about presenting her ideas but about echoing her commitment to a cause she believed in deeply. As parents filled the room and took their seats, a palpable energy hung in the air. Their eyes, inquisitive yet wary, met hers, and in that moment, Sarah felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. The meeting began, and Sarah's voice was steadier than she anticipated. "I want to explore how we can actively support inclusive practices in our school," she stated, observing nods of agreement and frowns of concern. It was a tightrope walk of emotions. A pivotal parent raised a hand. Some of us are concerned about pushing too fast. What do you say to those reservations? Every step forward may feel like a leap, but we want to be jumping blindfolded. We assess, we adapt, and we communicate. Sarah's determination propelled her to integrate reassurances into her outreach. This was not about imposing change but facilitating it collaboratively. As parents voiced their fears, what if children resisted? What if teachers were overwhelmed? She felt herself moving deeper into the conversation, grappling not only with their questions but with the implications of her answers. Each concern was a mirror reflecting her own insecurities. What if they were right? What if their kids couldn't accept diversity? But instead of faltering, she drew from the stories they'd shared last time, where vulnerabilities had become bridges instead of barriers. Change isn't easy, she reminded them, but neither is stagnation. Our children should see various realities so they can navigate life better. Encouraged by her own words, Sarah proposed smaller group discussions. This was not just her initiative, it belonged to all of them. By involving parents in shaping policies, she was inviting them to take ownership of the process. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Parents began brainstorming possibilities, sharing pragmatic steps to introduce gradual changes. The initial tension dissolved, replaced by constructive dialogue, and Sarah tasted a bittersweet triumph. She saw glimpses of a future she had envisioned, a tapestry woven from differing perspectives, thoughtfulness, and collective strength. Yet a nagging fear lingered like a shadow: could they maintain this momentum? After the meeting, as notes were exchanged and plans sketched out, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. She was no longer a lone advocate but part of a fledgling community. That very night, sitting in the quiet of her home, she typed up a synopsis of the meeting, cataloging ideas and action points, while also keeping a close eye on her emotions. But in the midst of her determination, a foreboding thought whispered through her mind. What would happen when push came to shove, when real complications arose, or when one of her ideas was met with fierce opposition? Could her growth withstand the pressure, or would the fortress she had built come crashing down? The uncertainty gnawed at her, casting a long shadow over her ambitions. Tomorrow's meeting would dive even deeper, continue pushing the boundaries of comfort and conversations. Secrets, disagreements, and existential questions hovered just beyond what had been shared. The stage was set for round 2, where the stakes were higher, but so too was her resolve. Could she stand firm when others tested her beliefs? Would she remain resilient in her mission to champion inclusivity in a sea of doubt? As she closed her laptop with a final sigh, she felt the weight shift yet again, a familiar sense of urgency propelling her forward. Tomorrow would not merely be another meeting, it would mark an intersection where resolve would either bloom or break. The dawn of the next meeting broke with an air of anticipation wrapped in tension. Sarah, restless and introspective, paced her living room, her palms sweaty with unease. She replayed conversations from yesterday's gathering, dissecting not only what had been said but how she had responded, her cadence, her choice of words. Each memory felt like a weight on her chest, urging her to reassess her approach. She had ignited dialogue, yet a fire could just as easily burn out if not fueled. She needed to ask herself why she felt so compelled to advocate for inclusivity. The gravity of her purpose suddenly crystallized in that moment. She intended to break the barriers of ignorance, a task that could very well lead to personal confrontation. Failure lingered at the edges of her thoughts, casting doubt over her clarity. In her commute to the school, Sarah made a conscious effort to redirect her racing thoughts. Instead of rehearsing answers for every potential backlash, she drafted a mental plan to embrace vulnerability. What if she addressed her uncertainties openly? The idea both terrified and excited her. This collective journey was not about embodying invincibility, it was about shared humanity. As she arrived at the school, warmth crept into her resolve, infusing her with a balance between caution and conviction. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the library, where familiar faces awaited. Their expectations, she reminded herself, were not solely demanding but hopeful. She positioned herself at the center of the room, a silent testament to her commitment to transformation. The meeting commenced with a subdued atmosphere, conversations swirling with an undercurrent of trepidation. Parents were prepared for their narratives, tense yet eager. As she took a seat, she felt the familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Instead of letting it consume her, she refocused, capturing the collective energy, waiting for the right moment to speak. Thank you all for coming together once again. I believe it's important we don't shy away from discussing where we stand in this journey of inclusivity. There will be mistakes, and we will face pushback. But that's where growth occurs when we confront discomfort, she stated, her tone imbued with an authenticity she hoped resonated. A father at the back raised an eyebrow. But how do we ensure our children don't face backlash themselves if we push these initiatives too hard? Sarah paused, each heartbeat drumming in her ears. Instead of faltering under scrutiny, she recalled the thread of connection that had sparked in the previous meeting. That's a valid question. But what if we allowed our children to be part of this discussion as well? Engaging in these topics early on can equip them with resilience, fostering open discussions at home. The silence that followed felt heavy, yet Sarah sensed the shift, the gradual leaning in, the curiosity sparking interest, the intrigue blooming into possibility. It was crucial that they understood this wasn't merely about policy adjustments, this was about instilling strength and compassion in their children. Given the opening, she leaned further into their collective discomfort. I, too, am facing uncertainties. I'm afraid at times, but my commitment to this cause trumps those fears. We owe it to our children to take strides towards understanding different perspectives. With every word she spoke, Sarah felt an empowerment swell. The room grew denser with shared narratives, creating an invisible thread knitting together every fear and aspiration. Parents began to voice their own apprehensions and hopes, each recounting their personal journeys of navigating diversity. A pivotal moment arrived when a mother, her voice shaking, shared her struggle with introducing the topic of inclusivity at home. I don't want to get it wrong, she admitted, her vulnerability disarming the atmosphere. None of us have it all figured out, Sarah replied gently. That's what makes this journey essential. We're learning together, and that process can deepen our understanding. As the meeting unfolded, the blend of perspectives transformed into a tapestry of resolve. Ideas flowed, and brainstorming ignited fresh paths forward. Still, Sarah held tight to her own uncertainty. The shadows of doubt still loomed, not to undo her progress, but to challenge her commitment. But now, as people began to rally around actionable steps, a fresh worry crept into her thoughts. Would her willingness to embrace vulnerability hold fast against the inevitable conflicts ahead? How would she respond when pushback became personal? In that moment, the path forward became both clearer and more treacherous. She sensed momentum building, yet trepidation tainted every triumph. Tomorrow's meeting would test not only their resolve but her personal fortitude in facing the storm ahead. What would truly happen when outside opinions pierced her conviction? How resilient would she remain when her beliefs were pushed to the edge? With a tight knot of anticipation binding her stomach, Sarah realized one thing: she was standing at a precipice, and the leap of faith was fast approaching. Sarah entered the school the following day with an undercurrent of resolve battling against her fear. The atmosphere felt charged, it was both exciting and paralyzing. She recalled yesterday's meeting, where vulnerability transformed hesitations into collaboration. Now, however, the stakes felt higher. Today's gathering would pull the curtains back on what she had crafted, and she felt unprepared. As she waited for the others to arrive, she opened her notebook, thumbing through pages of encouraged notes and fresh ideas. Each scribbled word served as a reminder of the commitment she had made not only to herself but to the parents who had begun to see their courage reflected in her. Still, a sheen of doubt shimmered within her confidence. Had she merely postponed the inevitable conflict? Once the room began to fill, the tension shifted. Several fathers and mothers exchanged glances, their chatter low and nervous. Sarah observed their body language, arms crossed, brows furrowed. It struck her then that this gathering wasn't just about discussions, it was a pivotal moment where change would either begin to flourish or falter. Thank you all for being here again today, she began, her voice steady but revealing an urgency beneath her calm facade. Last time, we made strides in revealing our fears and hopes around inclusivity. I'd like us to reflect on that as we approach today's session. A mother raised her hand, her expression a mix of concern and determination. But what happens if we challenge the school's current policies? The administrators might not appreciate how we are attempting to shake things up. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question. That's a risk we will inevitably face. But every step forward requires us to confront discomfort. The aim is not destruction but growth. As she spoke, Sarah felt a familiar sense of connection wash over her, igniting a deeper purpose within. The words flowed more freely from her now, and she pushed herself to address her own hesitation head-on. What if she became the target of scrutiny? What if the parents turned against her? You have my word that, as we navigate these challenges, I will support each of you through pushback and uncertainty. I'm not here to win anyone's approval, I'm here to advocate for something greater. The air grew dense with unspoken thoughts, her declaration hanging heavily in the balance. Yet, within that silence, she noticed glimmers of shifts, the gradual uncrossing of arms, hesitant nods of agreement, murmurs of shared determination rising from the corners of the room. A father spoke up, his skepticism still evident. How can we expect to address these issues without causing our children to feel marginalized themselves? Isn't that the same cycle we're trying to break? This time, Sarah felt the adrenaline course through her veins, a sharp reminder of the journey they all shared. What if we taught our children that understanding differences isn't about choosing sides? It is about embracing complexity. We can do this by modeling the very conversations we want them to engage in. As voices rang out, challenging positions transformed into dialogues filled with empathy and thoughtful considerations. Parents who initially approached with defensiveness now engaged earnestly, testing ideas and strategies. Yet, as Sarah opened the floor for brainstorming, a gnawing thought crept back into her mind. What if this openness exposed her inadequacies? What if she would lead her peers into conflict, only to let them down when they most needed guidance? She quickly tucked those doubts away, fixating on the potential they were building together. Each voice that spoke up felt like an affirmation, a beacon encouraging her to trust her instincts. In those moments, both the fear and the hope intensified, propelling her toward a transformative realization. Vulnerability was not solely her strength, it was a symbiotic thread essential in fostering resilience in others. Then, amid the ensuing discussions, an unexpected remark broke through the camaraderie. But how do you plan to deal with those who insist that inclusivity will dilute our current values? The question hung thickly in the air, and Sarah's heart raced, sensing an upcoming confrontation not just with different opinions but with her own limits. What strategies would she conjure to protect her vision without alienating the skeptics? The room fell silent again, anticipation rippling like an electric current through the gathered crowd. It was a moment that would call on all her learning, all the strength she had mustered. Sarah realized a decision loomed on the horizon, one that could either solidify her role as a leader or threaten to fracture these new connections. How far was she willing to go to ensure her commitment to inclusivity was reflected in tangible action? As Sarah's skin prickled with a mix of excitement and dread, she prepared to meet that challenge head-on. It wasn't just about keeping the conversation alive, it was about knowing when to stand firm. The realization dawned suddenly: today was not merely an extension of yesterday, but a critical turning point. She steeled herself for what may come next. Would she be ready to take a stand? Or would she falter when faced with the opposition? The answer awaited her, chilling and electrifying at the same time. The silence stretched, building tension with each passing second. Sarah felt the weight of every eye averted toward her. They were waiting for a response that could either solidify trust or unravel their burgeoning dialogue. "Let me address that," she said finally, her voice steady, though she could sense the knot tightening in her stomach. Inclusivity doesn't mean discarding our values. It's about reinterpreting them so they can evolve alongside our community. We must ask ourselves, what are our core values? Are they set in stone, or can they adapt to foster a broader understanding? A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of interest and skepticism. Sarah took a step closer to the group, hoping to generate connection through her proximity. It felt critical for the parents to realize that her fight for inclusivity wasn't just an abstract idea but a personal commitment born from her own experiences and learning. Change is uncomfortable, but it can also spark revival, she continued, drawing on her own journey as a mother and educator. When we expose our children to diverse perspectives, we're not erasing their identities, we're enriching them. Inclusivity is a way to teach resilience in a complex world. She could see a few heads nodding, affirming her message, yet doubt still hovered in the corners of their expressions. It was as if she had momentarily grasped their attention, but now she needed to hold it. Think about how often we celebrate different cultures and traditions during the holidays. Those moments are not just about food and music, they're lessons in acceptance. We can provide similar experiences in our classrooms. A mother from the back started to speak but hesitated, her brow furrowed. Cautiously, she added, "That sounds wonderful, but how will you convince those who are rigid in their beliefs?" Sarah met her gaze, the challenge evident in her eyes. "By listening first," she replied with conviction. "We can open dialogues with skepticism by inviting discussion rather than forcing agreement. Each step towards understanding someone else's perspective is a step towards compromise." The room began to pulse with energy, parents whispering to one another, gesturing animatedly as ideas swirled. Yet, within Sarah, a flicker of insecurity persisted. She questioned whether her strategies were sufficient. Were they enough to quell the potential backlash from the administration? Encouraged by the shifting dynamics, Sarah made a calculated decision to share a personal anecdote that had weighed heavily on her past. "I remember feeling profoundly alone in my journey as a new teacher, desperate for validation, only to find isolation. I lost only to rediscover that connection is what sparked change. My experience has shaped how I view advocacy, not as a battle, but as a bridge to understanding." The personal glimpse brought forth an emotional response. A few parents exchanged looks, no longer defensive but intrigued. Sarah noticed more relaxed body postures, and a shared energy began to radiate. Yet, the anchor of her doubt tightened again with something she realized: the world outside this meeting would not share their newfound camaraderie. There were challenges ahead: miscommunications, misunderstandings, and perhaps even sabotaging attempts to undermine this delicate collaboration. It was a moment for her to pivot towards clarity. This isn't just about ideology. The real work lies in execution. I want to cultivate a culture where discomfort leads us to meaningful discussions. And for that, I'll need your help. The moment she spoke those last words, she felt exposed yet liberated. It was a call to action that transcended her fears of inadequacy. Sarah acknowledged that her role could be one of initiative and partnership rather than singular authority. Parents began to raise their hands again, enthusiasm replacing reticence. Fresh ideas poured forth, each one reinforcing Sarah's resolve. She felt part of a movement beyond the confines of the room, and for the first time, she could visualize concrete steps ahead. But deep down, the reality of her vulnerability remained. How would she address the inevitable pushback? What if their progress was met with hostility? The thought made her pulse quicken. She realized that she had sacrificed her comfort for the collective effort. Yet, the cost had not gone unnoticed. She had to face her own biases and beliefs about what it meant to lead effectively. As the meeting wound down, the sense of unity shifted to a current of anticipation. The next step loomed large before her. Sarah knew she had to prepare not just for discussions with parents, but for an upcoming showdown with authority that could challenge everything they had built together. How would she navigate those turbulent waters without losing sight of her vision? The lingering tension hung in the air as she stepped back, her heart pounding with trepidation. The next chapter of her journey awaited, and with it, the profound question: would she hold on to her ideals under pressure, or would she falter? The true test was closing in. As Sarah walked back into the school for what felt like the umpteenth time, momentum buzzed within her like electricity, yet the weight of the future hung heavily on her shoulders. The discussions she had started with parents were beginning to intersect with the administration, and today would plunge deeper into her confrontation with the principal regarding the inclusivity initiative. With every step through the familiar hallways, anxiety woven tightly into her resolve, she clutched the notes in her hand, reminders of the passionate proposals crafted in collaboration with other parents. She felt buoyed by their collective motivation but was equally aware that today's discussion with the principal could pivot her journey in unexpected ways. Entering the principal's office felt like stepping into a lion's den. The environment was solid, resolute, much like the man seated at the desk, wearing a stern expression as he reviewed policy documents. There was a sense of foreboding at what lay ahead. He was fully aware of the whirlwind of conversations swirling around the need for inclusivity and was likely ready to shoot down any bullet she might fire in defense of her crusade. "Ms. Scott," he greeted, not bothering to disguise his impatience. "I assume you want to discuss the proposal put forth by the parents?" "That is exactly right," she replied, firming her stance. "I believe it is essential to establish a program prioritizing inclusivity and support for every student in our school." The words flowed from her mouth with an unexpected steadiness, her earlier doubts left behind like suitcases at an airport check-in. The principal raised an eyebrow, his posture defensive, clearly ready for a battle. "While I appreciate your enthusiasm, understand that implementing significant changes in policy takes time and careful consideration. We have standards and protocols we need to adhere to." Sarah felt the familiar stir of fear trying to encroach upon her thoughts but chose to anchor herself in the progress made. "With all due respect, the time for passive observation is over. This concern isn't merely an administrative formality, it's about the children in our care, especially those like Jake, who are vulnerable under the weight of isolation and stereotyping," she replied, her voice gaining momentum with each conviction-laden word. For a heartbeat, she was met with silence. His eyes narrowed, but Sarah pressed forward, fueled by the collective agonies that had brought them here. Research shows that schools with strong inclusivity programs see increases in both academic performance and emotional well-being among students. This is about cultivating environments where every child can emerge as their best, vibrant selves. Allowing our children to understand and embrace differences will build empathy, something we desperately need in today's world. His skepticism flickered, and she saw a hint of unrest in his demeanor. "You're asking a lot, and not every parent will support these types of changes. There could be backlash, misunderstandings that complicate the effort." Sarah noted the edge in his voice while recognizing an opportunity. "Then let us proactively engage those parents. This is about building a bridge, not isolating factions. I'm willing to lead workshops, facilitate dialogue, provide resources so that parents feel informed rather than overwhelmed. You don't have to face this shift alone." She could feel the intensity between them redefining the atmosphere in the office. The principal looked pensive, the lines on his forehead deepening with contemplation. "And what happens if we face opposition? If some parents mount considerable resistance?" That's precisely why community involvement is critical. We can craft forums for discussion, emphasize compassion as a learning experience, create a feedback loop rather than a dismissive line of dialogue. Together, we can pave the path forward as a cohesive unit. The air crackled with tension, and as he shifted in his chair, Sarah sensed something pivotal: the potential for acknowledgement from authority. "If we can outline an actionable plan backed by tangible support from both parents and faculty, I suppose we might entertain the notion. But it won't be easy, and risks will need to be mitigated." "Then let us create a clear plan," she urged, reflecting her unrelenting commitment. This was more than an initiative, it was an opportunity to enhance the entire climate of the school for every child. Tentatively, the principal nodded, feeling the momentum shift toward a potential alliance rather than a battlefront. It was a small victory, yet it resonated deeply within Sarah, igniting her resolve. By standing for Jake, she was igniting a flame for others in the same struggle. As they began discussing logistics on how to enact the proposed changes, Sarah's heart surged with optimism. She was not merely defending her son anymore, she was spearheading a movement that could reshape perceptions, empower young minds, and foster resilience for this and future generations. And as the meeting concluded, the tension that had engendered doubt and fear was replaced with strategic planning and purpose. Sarah realized she had emerged transformed, not just as an advocate for Jake but as a firm voice in her community, now rooted in a resilient determination to navigate challenges with grace. Wait until the culmination of this journey. The acknowledgement and support from the principal confirmed her hard-won transformation. The echoes of her past self began to fade as clarity triumphed over fear. As she exited the building, rejuvenated, Sarah thought back to where it had all begun, standing in her kitchen surrounded by doubts. Today, she had conquered not only the skepticism around her son's situation but had begun to forge pathways for others. She had demonstrated courage, advocated from abundant conviction, and articulated a vision with unwavering resolve. With a sense of achievement radiating from her core, Sarah was ready for whatever lay ahead. Her heart brimmed with fulfillment as she embraced this wave of transformation, a battle with vulnerability that had now woven through the fabric of her existence. She was equipped, empowered, and poised for a new beginning. This was no longer about stepping silently into the shadows. This was about leading from the forefront with palpable strength, leaving fear behind. And so, with renewed anticipation for the coming challenges, she took her next steps back into the light. You need to subscribe now. Let us continue inspiring stories like this. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more people. Comment with your thoughts and theories about Sarah's journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who could benefit from these uplifting narratives.